What would you say if I told you that right here at UNC-Asheville, North Carolina's public liberal arts institution, there's a demographic of students, a minority whose presence is increasing in our classrooms every academic year? And what would you say if I told you that right here, where the vision segment of our mission statement reads, UNC-Asheville students within a diverse and inclusive community experience liberal arts education at its best, the members of this group are using terms like do not belong, out of place, not at home, unwelcome, and discriminated to describe their experience in education? What would the appropriate reaction be from us if we heard these terms coming from a religious or ethnic minority or LGBTQ students? The appropriate reaction would be to be outraged. We should be outraged at that. That's absolutely unacceptable in an institution of higher learning this day of age. But I'm not talking about ethnic religious minorities. I'm not talking about LGBTQ. However, those groups do comprise a very important part of the group that I'm talking about. I'm talking about veterans. With the American involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan diminishing, thousands of veterans are getting out of the military and going to college. Veterans tend to come from poor or working class families, and the educational incentives offered by the military are pretty hard to turn down. And there's a story that was sold to us, and I say us, I am a student veteran. It sounds like this. Join the military, you'll deploy, maybe you'll deploy again, then you can come home, get out, and we'll pay for you to get an education and pursue a career that's chosen by you, not by your economic circumstances. But it hasn't been that simple. It's really difficult to get an exact number because a comprehensive study hasn't been done. But among the individual institutions that have looked at this, it appears that less than 50% of veterans who begin college with a GI Bill actually graduate. Less than 50%. I think it's sad, and disgraceful might be a better term to use, that the youth of our nation's poorest would volunteer, suspend their freedom, and for those of you that don't have military experience, the degree to which your freedom can be suspended is very difficult to communicate. Go and fight in a brutal war, some, myself included, being wounded in combat, some not coming home at all, with the promise of social mobility that less than 50% of them are going to experience. And I think it's really important to communicate that among veterans of my generation, when I say my generation, I'm referring to those of us that enlisted in the decade or so after the September 11th attacks. One of the primary reasons that we enlisted in the military was to receive these education benefits. In the social sciences, we talk about social mobility a good bit. We have a lot of concern about poverty and people who get stuck, and due to a lack in economic resources or cultural capital, aren't able to get out. And I'm going to give my own personal definition of cultural capital. Cultural capital is social awareness, skills, and connections that serve as assets for groups and individuals in maintaining social status or attaining social mobility. This can include things like education, family connections, and awareness of social rituals. These are things that tend to be deficient in the poor people of this country, and unfortunately for veterans, this has been the rule more than the exception. So what exactly is happening? I'm an anthropology student here at UNCA, and for the past roughly 15 months, I've been conducting an ethnography of veterans here at UNCA, at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and also at Western Michigan University. And what that means is that I've been spending time with these veterans. I've been talking to them, I've conducted some interviews, and I've recorded their stories, and I'm trying to gain a sense of what their experience in education has been. Unfortunately, the stories haven't been very good. This is a very diverse group, but there are some common threads that I would like to share with you. Age difference, this is universal. By the time veterans get out of the military, we're several years older than our classmates, and for a number of reasons, this can make it very difficult to relate and to feel at home in the classroom. Class disparity, I mentioned this already, and I do want to say that with the veterans that participated in this study with me, the vast majority of them said that they do feel that they come from a poorer background than their classmates do. Adult responsibilities. Veterans have jobs. We're mature adults. We have jobs, we have families, we have bills. And a lot of the veterans have discovered that, unfortunately, the undergraduate education model in our country is really geared towards very young adults that are out living on their own for the first time, that have relatively few responsibilities compared to mature adults beyond what their faculty ask them to do. And I'm going to share, there's a a veteran here at UNCA, a 30-year-old woman, and I remember last semester, she was telling me about having to make the choice between staying in school or keeping her job. The decision that she made was to quit her job. Her feeling was that the university wasn't really being very flexible with her in her schedule. She stayed in school. She's graduating this May, which I'm really happy about, but still talking to her, I know that the financial hardship was significant. Cultural conflict. Cultural conflict, this is where really the meat of this whole thing is. And one of the important things here is with a lot of us, if you look at me, a lot of us don't look like what people think of as a veteran. We have beards or longer hair, or we're women, which sometimes people don't associate with the military. And we'll be in class and people won't think that there's a veteran there. And what happens sometimes, we'll be having a class discussion, people will be getting real excited, and we might be talking about something like American foreign policy. And people get excited and they start to, students in the class will start to express their feelings about foreign policy in the United States, and then their feelings do start to extend towards the veterans themselves, questioning the ethical sensibilities or even the intellectual capacity of someone who would decide to volunteer to participate in these wars. There's a religious element involved here too. This part's kind of difficult to explain because not all veterans are religious. However, from this study, most of the veterans told me that they feel that they do come from more religious or more conservative families than most of their classmates do. And a very disturbing trend that I've heard from them is that they feel that students and even faculty are too comfortable disparaging their religion in the classroom during class. Like I said, it's kind of complicated. We're not necessarily all religious, but we may have family and such back home that are more religious than some people in our classes, and people feel hurt by this. And I'm not a religious person myself, but I can say that I've seen this and I've experienced it, and it's real. Now, stereotypes. If you don't hear anything else that I say today, please pay attention to me right now. This is the most salient point that I'm going to make, the thing that I really want to get across to you. The situation is extremely complicated. And when I say situation, I'm talking about the global situation, the national situation. We're living in a time of war, militarization, a political polarization that I believe to be the real nemesis of our times concerning our ability to apply critical thought and have productive conversation with each other and accomplishing things. It's a time of fear and it's a time of terror. And this is very confusing to us as a people, as a nation. But it's not only confusing to us as a people, but it's confusing to those who, for whatever reason it was, decided to go and fight in this war with the understanding that they were making the world a better place in doing so. I don't want to generalize too much, but I can speak for the veterans that participated in my study, and it was a very diverse group. The majority of the veterans that participated in this study with me are not war supporters. They have sleepless nights, they have guilt, they have pain and angst from their participation in things that were horrifying and very difficult to figure out and understand. It's always an insult if we disparage someone, but it becomes a sort of double insult if we disparage someone for their participation in something that they may not be sure about how they feel, sleepless nights and such. So I want everyone to consider that, please. Concerning stereotypes, it's not just individuals that stereotype. It can be done on an institutional level as well. I'm going to share a brief story about an individual at another college that I visited. And he was an infantryman in the Marines. He got out of the infantry and went to college. And he went and met with his career counselor, and though he protested and it wasn't what he wanted to do, he felt like he was pressured into the criminal justice major. And please don't misunderstand me. I don't want to disparage the criminal justice major one bit. It's very important, very relevant course of study, but it was not what this individual wanted to do. He wasn't happy majoring in criminal justice. It wasn't fulfilling to him, but the institution seemed to feel that for this former infantryman, the only sort of work for which he was suited was that involves carrying a firearm and wearing a uniform. Well, thank fortune, he transferred to another college and had a better experience there with the career counselors. And was allowed to go into what he wanted to go into, and he wanted to teach middle school students. And after he started student teaching, he shared with me that he finds this very fulfilling. He enjoys the challenge. He likes having the opportunity to go and do something that's giving back, and knowing that he has the competence and the patience to do so. So, like I said, nothing against criminal justice at all, but in this time where teachers are so important to us, what a resource would have been lost in the form of someone who was motivated to work with this notoriously difficult age group, because as an institution we felt that the only work for which he was suited was that involves carrying a firearm and wearing a uniform. Next thing, and I'm just going to touch on this, but I could do a whole talk on this on its own, it's PTSD. More than half of the veterans that participated in this study have been in combat, and the majority of them in some form are still suffering from the trauma that they experienced. This is pervasive, and college campuses can be frightening places. We have crowds, we have tight classrooms, and sometimes our discussions about really difficult things, and this is present, and it's something that we really need to be aware of. So what are we going to do about all this? Needless to say, this is a very complicated question, and I'm not pretentious enough to believe that I have all the answers. But through this study, I do have a few things that I've seen and some recommendations I'd like to make. One thing is awareness. Just knowing that this is here goes a long way. I'm going to bring this up because when I first came to UNCA, I was part of starting a student veterans organization, and I was really disturbed when I found out that UNCA had no idea who was a veteran here. They weren't tracking it at all, and it made it really difficult to find people to recruit for the group. This has been remedied. UNCA is tracking this now, and there have been some big improvements, but I admit that I still have some fear that because the university now honors veterans in graduation with a cord, a red, white, and blue cord to thank them for their service, there might still be a few people who fell through the cracks and are in the next couple of years might not be able to have that, but it has gotten a lot better, so I'm really happy about that. Education. When I say education, I'm talking about concerted awareness education. I would like to see a institutionalized formal education that's given to students and to faculty about veterans that says that we're here, says who we are, what we've been through, what we're going through, and what this entire experience has been, tells people about PTSD and understanding it, dispelling some of the myths. And I bring this up because something that was really surprising to me when I started this study, I was talking to some of the traditional college students, and I was shocked by how few people actually knew that educational resources are a reason that people join the military. So I would ask, why do you think that people join the military? And they would say, I don't know, I guess I thought that people joined the military because it was what they wanted to do. So for the reasons that we've talked about already, we can understand why it's so important to educate people about why we're here and how we got here. Next thing is faculty. And when I started this study, I had no idea how important faculty were to student veterans. Something that we're going to have to accept is that no matter what we do, no matter how hard we try, there are going to be veterans who are just not going to fit in. The differences are too great. They're not going to feel comfortable with it. They're not going to want to go to Rocky Palooza. They're not going to want to build a float for the homecoming parade. They're not going to want to play hacky sack on the quad. It's just not going to happen. And in these cases, their relationships with faculty are their only meaningful connection to the university itself. The veterans respect faculty for their leadership and their expertise on the subjects. And also, I don't want to focus on titles too much, but in the military, we are trained to respect leadership and the person that's up in the front of the room. And I think that this is revealed by the fact that among many of the veterans in this study, one of the greatest irritants to them in school is when their classmates, when they feel that their classmates aren't respecting the instructor, they're texting or talking to each other in class. You don't do that in the military. If you're in a classroom environment in the military, you listen, you respect the person in the front of the room. And for a lot of veterans who don't feel comfortable in the classroom, very often, the mature adult conversation that they're able to have with faculty members as they're working with them in and after class is something that's fulfilling to them and something that makes them feel connected to the university. I think that knowing this, that this provides a very good leadership opportunity for faculty in trying to address this issue itself. So in conclusion, I would like everyone to please consider what we as veterans are bringing to the table. I may have made us sound a little bit like kind of a pitiful group. I hope I didn't, but that's not what's going on. We've been dramatically removed from the context that a lot of our processes were really formed in. And please consider that when you're sitting in class and there's a veteran next to you who is struggling with their math problems because they haven't been in an advanced math class for over a decade, just a year ago they may have been operating a nuclear submarine. And when there's a veteran in your class who, during a class discussion on something, social sciences for example, they share their opinions and you feel that they're not particularly relevant or they're outdated because of the veteran's age, please consider that just a year ago, that veteran may have been in an Afghan village negotiating with village elders, trying to find a way to safely get their children to school. So like I said, please consider what we're bringing to the table. Please honor veterans for the sacrifices that they've made and how hard they worked and the things that they tried to do, the things that they're going through to try to attain that social mobility and improving their lives, the social mobility that in higher education is so important to us. Thank you.